Okay, so you know how sometimes we talk about those what if situations, like what would we do if certain things happen?
Yeah, the whole what if game.
Right. And you sent us this really interesting resource for English language learners that was all about that. You were especially curious about how we actually use these conditional sentences and phrases in real life.
So basically, how to make them work for you without getting lost in all the grammar rules.
Exactly. And I think what makes this so fascinating is that even though these seem like pretty basic language concepts, they actually touch on something really depth about how we think, how we imagine different possibilities, how we weigh up how likely they are.
It's like we're peeking into how our brains work when we consider different paths and outcomes. And the resource you found really highlighted two key areas. The first one is all about those really out there situations, things that we might fantasize about but don't actually expect to happen.
Like winning the lottery or being stranded on a desert island.
Exactly. And for these really improbable what ifs, the language takes on a specific form. You often hear a structure like if, followed by a verb in the past tense. Then the main part of the sentence uses would, plus the base form of another verb.
The resource gave a really classic example. If Eric asked you out on a date, what would you say?
And the answer was, I would say yes.
Obviously. And another one was, if you won the lottery, what would you do?
With the response, I would buy 2 tickets for a trip around the world.
See, it's funny how even in these purely hypothetical situations, we reveal something about our hopes and dreams, like what we'd actually do if we had the chance.
It's true, it's like a little window into our desires.
Yeah.
And did you notice that shift to the past tense with one? It's almost like the grammar itself is putting a little distance between us and the present reality, signaling that this isn't really happening.
Oh, I see. So it's saying, let's step into a world where this might be true, even though it probably isn't. And then that would buy follows naturally as a consequence within that imagined scenario.
Precisely. And there's this one interesting quirk that comes up in these unreal situations that's worth pointing out. It has to do with the verb to be.
Oh, okay. Tell me more.
So instead of using was, we almost always use were, no matter if we're talking about I, you, he, she, or it. So it becomes if I were you, not if I was you.
Right, right. And if you were president, not if you was president.
Right, exactly. And this is something that even native English speakers trip up on sometimes. The resource even pointed that out. But using were in these if clauses really emphasizes that we're stepping outside of the actual present.
It kind of adds to that sense of unreality. It's like a grammatical cue to signal, hey, this is all hypothetical.
That's a great way to put it. We saw this in action with some of those examples, like, if I were you, I would dye my hair red.
That's a bold choice.
And if you were me, what would you do?
Mhm.
It's that consistent use of were that really places us firmly in that imaginary realm. But okay, let's shift gears for a second and bring our feet back down to earth.
Back to reality.
Yes. Let's talk about those what-ifs that are actually much more likely to happen, those everyday scenarios where we're really considering potential outcomes.
Right, because those happen all the time.
And the structure for these more probable scenarios often uses a slightly different pattern. It's usually if followed by the present tense of a verb. And then in the main part of the sentence, it's will plus the base form of a verb.
It's almost like it's more directly connected to a potential future because it feels more likely to
I
happen.
think so. And the dialogue provided a perfect example of this. If you buy me a ticket, I'll go with you for sure.
Ah, yes. That makes sense. Buy is in the present tense, and then I'll go, which is short for I will go.
Exactly. It makes it feel much more like a genuine possibility, right?
Definitely.
And there are countless everyday examples we could use. If it rains tomorrow, I will stay home and watch TV.
Mm.
Or if we have lunch tomorrow, what will we eat? These are the sorts of things we might actually discuss and plan for.
Absolutely. And it's amazing how just a small change in the verb tense from past to present can make such a big difference in how real something feels to us.
It really makes you think about how our minds process these potential futures, like how we use grammar as a subtle way to signal how much we believe something might actually happen.
It's like a subconscious language code. So why don't we go back to the dialogue and see how these two types of what ifs play out in a natural conversation.
Great idea.
One person says, if it stops raining, we'll go for a walk later.
Classic first conditional. If it stops raining, present tense. Will go, will plus base verb. It's a statement about a future action that depends on something happening in the present. Pretty straightforward.
Right. And then the very next thing they say is, but what if it doesn't stop?
And even though it's phrased as a question, it's still sticking with that first conditional. The if it doesn't stop part is still in the present tense, and it implies that if the rain doesn't stop, well, they won't go for the walk.
So it's a very natural way to express a possible alternative outcome.
Exactly. It's like saying, okay, here's plan A, but what about plan B? Okay, how about this one? If we watch something, I prefer a comedy.
Another first conditional. If we watch, present tense,
Yeah.
and then it implies I will prefer a comedy. So again, it's a preference that's dependent on a future action.
You've got it. Okay, now the conversation switches back to something a bit more hypothetical. If I had more time, I'd watch comedies every day.
If I had, so we're back to that past tense, and I'd watch, which is short for I would watch.
And that implies that the speaker doesn't actually have enough time to watch comedies every day. So it becomes this unreal, imagined scenario.
Which then leads to the next question. But if you had the time, would you get bored of them?
A clear second conditional. If you had, past tense, followed by would you get, which is would, plus the base verb get. So it's exploring a hypothetical outcome within that unlikely scenario. Like, okay, let's pretend you did have all this time. What then?
It's like a thought experiment.
Yeah, exactly. And then we get this one interesting line. If I'd studied filmmaking, I might have tried writing a comedy script. Now, the verbs here look a little different.
Yeah, it seems like it's playing with time in a different way, like looking back instead of forward.
You're right. This is a little glimpse into what's called the third conditional. Instead of talking about future possibilities, it looks back at a past that didn't happen and imagines a different outcome. It often uses if plus had plus past participle like had studied, and would might could have plus past participle like might have tried. It wasn't really the focus of this resource, but it's another example of how we use language to explore those what-if scenarios just in the past tense.
Right, fascinating. But let's stick with those main two types for now. What else did the dialogue have?
Let's see. If you ever decide to do it, let me know.
Okay, back to the first conditional. If you ever decide, present tense, implying you will let me know,
Yeah.
it's all about a future action that depends on a decision.
Exactly. And then there was, if you hadn't reminded me, I would have forgotten my umbrella today. This one is a little tricky.
Yeah, like it's mixing different time frames together.
It is. This is probably what's called a mixed conditional. It's where a past unreal condition, hadn't reminded, leads to a consequence in the present, would have forgotten. It's a great example of how flexible these what-if structures can be.
It's like saying, because something didn't happen in the past, this is the situation I'm in right now.
Exactly. Okay, focusing back on those main two types, we have, if you get wet, you always catch a cold.
If you get wet, so we've got that present tense. But the second part, you always catch a cold, seems more like a general truth, not a specific future prediction.
I see what you mean. It's like a first conditional that's become a strong, habitual pattern for this person, almost like a rule of nature for them.
Okay, that's a helpful distinction. What about this one? And if I catch a cold, I'm miserable for days.
Straight back to the first conditional. If I catch, present tense, I am miserable, a likely future state.
All right, we're almost through all the examples from the dialogue. Next is, if the rain lets up, let's grab some snacks for the movie.
Another first conditional, but with a bit of a twist. If the rain lets up, present tense, and let's grab is actually a suggestion, which implies we will grab.
Right. It's like a softened way of saying we will. Okay, and last but not least, and if there's popcorn, count me in.
Again, a first conditional with an implied I will be counted in if that condition is met.
So, wow, we've really seen how much we rely on these two main conditional structures to talk about all sorts of possibilities and outcomes in everyday conversation.
Absolutely. They're like the building blocks for all our what-if scenarios. And the resource you shared did a great job of highlighting some specific vocabulary that pops up a lot in these discussions too.
Oh, yeah, it'd be good to touch on those. The first one was ask someone out, like in the example, if Eric asked you out. What does that mean exactly?
To ask someone out means to invite them on a date, usually romantically. It's one of those phrasal verbs in English where the combination of words creates a meaning that's different from the individual words themselves.
Right. Okay, then we had freak out in the sentence. My dad would freak out if I even mentioned a trip like that.
To freak out basically means to overreact or to become really agitated or upset. It suggests a sudden and intense emotional response.
So not a calm and collected reaction.
Definitely not.
And the last vocabulary item was committed, as in she would faint and have me committed. This one seems a bit more serious.
Yeah, it is. To have someone committed means to have them involuntarily placed in a mental institution.
Wow, okay. That's heavy.
It is. It usually happens when someone is considered a danger to themselves or others due to a mental health condition. So it's important to understand the specific context when you hear this word because it can have different meanings.
Absolutely. Knowing these phrases definitely helps to understand the full picture of what's being said in these what if situations. It's not just the grammar, it's the emotional weight of the words we choose, too.
Exactly. And as your resource probably pointed out, playing this what-if game is something humans do all the time.
It's true. From the time we're kids, we're always imagining different scenarios and possibilities.
And as adults, we use it to plan for the future, make decisions, and even just to understand our own hopes and fears.
It's like a constant stream of mental simulations running in the background.
Exactly. And being comfortable with these conditional structures, with these if-then relationships, is so important for expressing those thoughts clearly and for understanding what other people are imagining too.
It's like a key that unlocks a whole world of possibilities.
It really is,
Yeah.
which actually brings up a really interesting question. Why are we so drawn to these what-if scenarios in the first place?
That's a good one.
Do you think it's a way to try and prepare for the unknown?
Maybe. Or to explore different options without any real-world risk.
Could be. Or maybe it's a way to better understand ourselves, to figure out what we truly want or what we're most afraid of.
I think it's probably a bit of all of those things.
Probably. Humans are complex, right?
That's for sure. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, so let's wrap things up. You've now got a much clearer understanding of those two main ways we use language to talk about hypothetical situations. The unlikely ones using if plus past tense would plus base verb, often with were, and the more probable ones using if plus present tense will plus base verb.
And we even touch on a few other variations, just to show you how flexible and nuanced these structures can be. Plus, we've looked at some specific vocabulary that's really helpful for navigating these what-if conversations.
So, thinking back to why you were interested in this topic, this knowledge should really help you feel more confident when you're talking about possibilities, whether it's in your everyday life, when you're making plans, or even just when you're dreaming big.
You can now jump into those what-if conversations knowing exactly how the language works. And who knows, maybe you'll even discover some new things about yourself along the way.
Exactly. So here's a final thought for you to consider. What is it about these what-if scenarios, from the fantastical to the everyday, that has such a powerful hold on us? How do they shape our plans, our fears, our understanding of ourselves and the world? What other what-if questions has this deep dive sparked for you?
It's definitely something to think about.
Absolutely. And with that, we'll leave you to ponder those questions on your own.
Until next time.
See you then.